Okay, welcome my snazzy, jazzy, beautiful people. I'm not doing my usual intro right now because if you're new here and you didn't know, this is actually my podcast, Wait, Let Me Think. I don't usually record my face, but I thought it'd be nice since we're talking about body and hair today. Hello ladies, and gentlethems. Welcome to Wait, Let Me Think, a journal podcast where I get to open up, critically reflect, and shamelessly ramble as I do anyway. I've literally recorded this video, or a version of this podcast, at least 3 times already. I first shaved my head in January. So it's been a while. It's been a long time coming. Firstly, how is everybody? This is like a really relaxed format of video. Also, welcome to my bed. This little nice corner used to be all white and very personalityless, and I did a little room makeover and put some stuff that are near and dear to my heart. Other than that, I hope you're doing well. I hope you are, taking care of yourself despite the times and finding moments of peace and joy. And I hope that this can be some sort of moment of that as well. If you are unfamiliar with my channel and you're newly visiting, this is a place on the internet where I like to go beyond the politics of wokeness and really dissect all of these societal issues that we run into. And I'm really interested in critical thinking. So I'm going to give you guys a story time of how I went bald and do so in a critical manner and look at the sociopolitical context of me doing so. So throughout this episode, I'm going to be referring to my notebook where I wrote all of these notes in about my experience. But the first thing that I wanted to share with you is how going bald was about getting closer to my higher self, which isn't rebellious to me, but it is towards societal expectations. So when I went bald, I had many reactions on my Instagram. Some of the questions and statements that I got were, "But why?" And "You still look beautiful," emphasis on the still, and "You're so brave." And the question that I wanted to raise from these collections of thoughts that other people gave to me is, why is it brave for people who identify as femme to cut all their hair off? This question is particularly important for, trans women who are often invalidated because they don't present as feminine, or queer women in general, women who are questioned just because they do not present as what society dictates as feminine, but also to disclaim the societal repercussions of cisgendered and heterosexual women are far smaller than for trans or queer women. So I identify as a cis woman, and therefore I, will never know how much more these horrible binaries of feminine and masculine that are placed on men and women are detrimental to people who are outside of my privileged bubble. So take my experience for what it is. You know my context. Now let's move on. So the issue with this is that we have standards for what women are supposed to look like. These are all socially constructed. More importantly, it's a Western thought. In many non-Western cultures, long hair is associated with more than just one gender or sexuality. So that's something that we need to consider, right? Let's deconstruct that. We have standards for what women are supposed to look like. This is different in different cultures, but in Indonesia, where I grew up, it was definitely having long hair, and of course being a woman and what you need to look like are also tied to issues of sexuality, class, etc., and also like xenophobia, your skin color, again, etc. So women are expected in Indonesia to have long hair, to often be skinny, to be able-bodied, to dress femininely, not provocative, but interesting and rich, a lot of soft colors. You don't draw too much attention, but you take care of yourself. There are all these, lines that you have to tiptoe, which I'm sure if you identify as a woman or femme, or even if you're a dude who's completely outside of this experience, you probably see the same patterns for your own sociopolitical group or community, etc. And these are all socially constructed because, there is no scientific tie to, like, women having to have long hair means that they're women. You know what I mean? You can just look up all these beauty standards ranging from the 1920s to 2020. All these different hairstyles have changed over time. Whether women have more hair or less, whether they're hairless at all, whether they put a lot of products in it, whether they dye it, etc., etc. And all of these things, of course, are tied with who is the dominant group at the time and how they've set this beauty standard. And it's also tied to capitalism because a lot of these beauty standards are set by companies and they're selling this idea of what is beautiful to you just so that you'll buy their products, right? So none of the idea of what is beautiful has been placed onto you. It's something that you learn. For me, the question is, what's so important about going bald anyway? A lot of people wanted me to make a video about going bald, and obviously in its sociopolitical context, it matters because that is still seen as a rebellious act against societal expectations for women to perform femininity in order to be a good woman, for instance. But to me, cutting my hair is just cutting my hair. Going bald is not a political thing in the way that I set out to do it. I wanted it to be a fashion statement. I was cutting my hair at the time shorter and shorter. I had a bob, I had bangs. At this point, I was either going to go into what they call a boy cut or a pixie cut, or I was just going to chop it all off. Like there was really nowhere else to go in terms of like feminine haircuts. And not only was it not important for me, as in it wasn't a big deal, I also wish that it wasn't a big deal for everyone either. So, the big idea. I am not here on this earth to be physically attractive. I am here to learn new things and spiritually grow and heal and do good for others and enrich myself and others. I am not here to impress others with my looks. So this might seem obvious to a lot of people, but I was raised in a misogynistic culture that teaches young girls, but not limited to them, to very much care about how we look. So much so that I think a lot of women build their lives and worth around how they look. In Indonesia, when I meet relatives, they'll often say, "Did you get fatter? Skinnier? You look tired. You've gotten so much prettier since the last time I've seen you." It's almost like we don't have anything else to say to each other unless we comment on each other's physical appearance. And that is the problem. So when I cut my hair off, I'm going to give you the story time now. I had been sitting on the idea for maybe 6 months to a year. My cousin Mel cuts my hair. Shout out to Mel. I'll link all of his Instagram information down below. He makes wigs now. He does hair in the Netherlands, so, help him out. But Mel does my hair, and I was asking him, what do you think should be the next, edgy thing that I do with how I look? Because I do consult his, for his opinion before I get my hair cut. And he was like, well, what would be really cool is for you to go full, buzz cut, chop all of your hair off. It terrified me at first. I was like, my first reaction to everything is oh, hell yeah. And then I was like, oh, wait a minute. I don't know what that would look like. I grew up with really, really, really long hair up to my butt. I had schoolgirl bangs for most of my childhood. I was always complimented on my hair, and my hair was synonymous with my beauty. Every auntie that I ever visited or that has ever seen me, even uncles, literally anyone, strangers would come up to me back home in Indonesia and be like, "Oh my god, you are so beautiful." And this was synonymous with the fact that I had long hair. It was really thick, this ideal sort of doll-like figure, and also the fact that I had lighter skin. And that was also a really important thing to consider, and we'll circle back to that later. So I grew up with this idea that having long hair meant being beautiful, right? And being beautiful meant being a good girl. In order for me to succeed socially, I had to be perceived as good. And this we internalize in many different ways, and it has to do with not just gender, but it silences us and it manipulates us into behaving how society wants us to behave. And you might not think that like cutting your hair is that deep, but it has all of these political roots in why you might struggle to think of yourself that way. And I had a lot of young girls DM me after I had, shaven all my head off. Hair off, not head. My head is still intact. I got skin on my scalp. When I shaved my hair off, oh my god, I'm gonna keep saying that. When I shaved my hair off. A lot of young girls were like, I would never ever think of doing that. I would never be so brave. I don't know where you get like the inspiration or the, tenacity, bravery, etc. They could not imagine themselves doing it. And for me, that was all the more reason to do it. For me, like when I start to struggle, because then I was starting to think, right, how am I going to dress? Like, how am I going to present myself? Am I going to lean into my femininity or am I going to lean into my masculinity? I am a person that has always been very much in both sides. I never like dressed in a certain way, adhering to a certain style. I'm like a very expressively fluid person. I dabble with makeup. I do things that are pretty like embodied. I dance, I sing, I make art. So I've always been pretty fluid in that regard. And when I imagined myself shaving my hair off, I suddenly hit a wall and I suddenly got scared. I was like, I don't know how people are going to perceive me. I don't know if I'm going to come off as this and this and this or not, or if I am. And before I shaved my hair off, I had gone blonde. I had like blonde highlights. I bleached a lot of my hair. That was the first time I bleached my hair. And I was sort of perfectly fitting into this box of like pretty mixed race, half Asian, half European girl. You know what I mean? I was outspoken and that it was like valued in my academic life, but at the same time I was still, adhering to what like pretty is supposed to be, and I was experimenting with a lot of makeup, so I was putting on a lot of makeup, and that's, checks the right boxes as a girl. So I had sort of perfected my image. And I hate that. I absolutely hate that. I think my identity is fluid and outside of this flesh suit that I am so honored to have and to take care of. But I hate that I fall into the trap of relying on this flesh suit to build an identity. I think that everything should rely on what's beneath, and I think that my physicality is fun to play around with, to bend my identity or how I express my identity, but it is not in any way the benchmark for it. So that's part of the reason why I did it. It was basically like I didn't dare, so of course I was going to do it. And then I finally did it in Jakarta. So it was sort of in the beginning of COVID. Jakarta hadn't gone into lockdown yet. It wasn't like, it was nowhere near as bad as it is now. And I had a dream, actually. Around that time I was staying with my grandparents, with my grandpa, and I was staying with my sister, Ita, and we were at their house, and I was in the beginning stages of doing my shadow work, which I can do a whole other video later, but that's essentially spiritual and trauma healing work where you really look at all of your patterns and, how you've become sort of in an automatic state. So you deconstruct all of your reasonings and all of your behaviors and every single thought you have, any kind of pattern that you have in your personality, you look at it and you see where that comes from, and then you see if you could grow beyond that, if that makes sense. So I was doing a lot of shadow work at the time, and then I was getting a lot of like prophetic dreams. I get a lot of spiritual dreams. Sometimes I get these dreams where I'm like, this means something and I need to act on it, or something's going to come into my life. And I had a dream where I was completely bald, which I never had before. I had been thinking about going bald for a very long time, but I had never actually dreamt it. And then I woke up, and this was around the time where I was like really into TikTok, and I thought to myself, okay, if I get a sign from TikTok, then I'm gonna shave my hair off. Lo and behold, the first like 5 videos that I got on my For You page were either of bald women or bald femme people, or people literally shaving their hair off on camera. So I was like, okay, I gotta do it. I have to do it. This is a sign. The universe is telling me I gotta do it. So I kind of woke up, and then I told my mom, I was like, sorry, ma'am, I'm shaving my hair off. And she was very unhappy with me. She did not like the fact that I was gonna do it. And this is, I think, also a huge marker of my life, because I did it when I was 20 years old, and it was kind of like the first decision that I was making outside of my parents' consultation. You know, obviously I come from a very traditional, like, Indonesian family. I still needed their permission, but it was kind of the first step to really making independent decisions for myself, and it's such a huge thing where you can't really go back from. You know, you're gonna have to live with the fact that you don't have hair on your head for the next at least year until it grows back. And my mother was not having it at all. She was not into it. She was pissed off, and she continued to be for like a long while that day. And we went around our business, and we were like near a mall, and then I called my dad, and I was like, you know what, Dad, I had a message from the universe, and he knows about my spiritual side. And I was like, I gotta shave my hair off, you know, dude. I gotta shave my hair off, sir. And he was like, well, what am I gonna do? You're 20 years old now. You gotta make your own decisions, man. Like, I don't... And that was pretty surprising to me, because I come from pretty, like, strict parents, and I don't get to make a lot of drastic decisions on the spot on my own. So that was sort of a sign to me as well, like, okay, I'm getting a lot more flexibility from sort of the gatekeepers of my decision making. So anyways, we go to the mall, and I get to the front desk of this salon that I had chosen, and I was like, I would like to shave my hair off, please. I would like a buzz cut. And the lady behind the counter was like, ugh, God, don't tell me. This has to be some sort of like casting decision, right? And I didn't understand her at first, and my mom was like, no, she's not a model. And I was like, oh. So that was the first, like, assumption thing that they had. They were like, well, obviously, no girl in their right mind would want all their hair off. This had to have been a company, you know, that wanted it for aesthetic purposes because it's in fashion or whatever. Could not have been a conscious decision that she's making for herself. So I was like, well, no, actually, I want to do it for me. And she was like, oh, why? And I thought that was so interesting and such a telling example of how women police each other, right? Especially in the Indonesian culture, or at least Javanese, because I am from Java, and this was in Jakarta. A lot of women think that it's their business what other women are deciding for themselves and their bodies and their lives. And we question other women, and we make them feel bad about it, and we scrutinize and we criticize, instead of uplifting other women and going, you know what, good for you that you're taking charge of how you physically look or how you express yourself. So moving on from that experience, I get a guy who is going to shave my hair off, and he was like, are you sure? And I was like, yes. At this point, like, it was pretty late in the night, the mall was closing, and I was like, we can't wait any longer. You need to cut my hair now, you know? So he's like, you know what? I'm going to slowly cut it off bit by bit, and then, you know, slowly shave it off just so you know what you're gonna look like, and then you can say stop when you want me to stop. And I was like, I would not want you to stop, but I appreciate it. We can take it slow. I didn't need to take it slow. And for some reason, all of these people who are strangers to me needed to take that extra time, as if I was making some grand sacrifice of the whole community. Like by cutting my hair off, I was harming everyone else. And so this was a decision we all needed to make slowly and carefully. And I'm like, girl, it's just hair. It's just hair. And my hair grows so fast, so unbelievably fast, that I was like, what? For what? I'm ready for it to be off. At this point, I was like getting a little pissed and annoyed. I was like, out of spite, I was kind of like, get it off. Because at first it was kind of just a decision that I made on my own, and I was like, I'm ready for it to be off now, you know? And at this point, I was like reacting to the energy that I was getting, and a lot of it was confrontational and frictional, and they were just not accepting of it. So anyways, I get my hair shaved off, and the first thing that the guy says to me is, oh, you know what? It actually looks so much better than I expected. But I guess that's sort of self-explanatory, because people with Western heads, white, you know, like whiter features, etc., have like, they just have better skull shapes, so they look more beautiful when they're bald. Moment of silence for that. There's so much to unpack there, right? As I was saying, beauty standards are socialized things. They are things that are constructed by society, and it contains a lot of power structures and power dynamics that are existing in society. And a lot of the Indonesian beauty standard, and I think globally, you know, this is recognized in a lot of places, that the beauty standards are according to Western features. So if you have lighter hair, even as an Asian woman, you know, in Indonesia, if you had bleached hair, that would be more beautiful. The idea of gender and like woman in itself and femininity, that's also very Western, and it's a colonial idea, right? The idea that if you're lighter skinned, you have a smaller or bridge nose or upturned nose, that's more beautiful. The idea that if you have bigger eyes, that's more beautiful. I could keep going, you know, the more Western presenting you are, the more ideal you are in Indonesian society. And that is a load of crap. That's a load of crap. I'm not here for it. I do not like to perpetuate it. And what's worse is that he himself was an Indonesian presenting person, as in, if I don't know his ethnic background, he looks fully native Indonesian to me. And he was the one saying that to me. That shows how Indonesians have internalized this idea of inferiority and this neo-colonial thinking so far deep that they are policing themselves and therefore policing others with this idea. And we don't like that. We don't like that. That's something to think about, you know? How are we perpetuating these horrible beauty standards that are so detrimental to everyone's lives? And we can call it beauty standards and leave it at that, but we all know that there is so much research about how much beauty standards affect your mental health, how that will lead to horrible relationships with you and your body and how you treat your body. It can cause so much damage, even if it's something that sounds trivial. Moving on. Okay, let me see. An even bigger issue is these standards of beauty are patriarchal and is in favor of the male gaze. Ooh, fun times. Let's see. For as long as I remember, the girls around me have always cared way more about how they look, and we're always policing each other, as I said. Women call out each other for how they look, and we come together to complain about our weight, skin, etc. There's a reason why the beauty industry is mainly directed at women. Also true. We develop ideas of quote-unquote too much makeup, not enough, overdressed, not enough effort, too fat, too skinny, not enough ass, not enough boobs, too tall, too short, to the point that girls are taught to be obsessed with their length of their eyelashes or the exact shape of their eyebrows. Why? For what? For what? We are wasting so much energy nitpicking how we physically look. And don't get me wrong, I know that there's a good reason why we do this, and we should not be mean to ourselves and go, why do we do this? We do this because the people around us police the way we look. That is why we do it. It's a survival method, right? We do it because we see how it brings you more success, more abundance, more compliments. People like you better. People give you more jobs. You are more likely to be liked, essentially, and to have privileges if people see you as pretty when you're a woman or a femme-presenting person. Because of heteronormative norms in society, meaning society assumes there is a gender binary between men and women, and everyone is straight, we're supposed to obsess over our looks in service of the consumption of the opposite sex. That's in quotation marks. So then we have myths like girls don't like boys who are shorter than them, or boys don't like girls who aren't feminine, and any anomalies equals queerness. So all this to say, we do not exist for other people's consumption, and our worth should not be based on how we alter how we look for others. This is even more important, even though this is an all genders, all sexualities, etc. issue. This is, I think, even more emphasized because of the male gaze, which subjects women and other communities to police ourselves in favor of the idea that we want attention from men. Because that's ultimately what the male gaze and what patriarchal standards force women to compete for. Okay? This is why we have internalized misogyny. Okay? This is why a lot of women or a lot of girls can't stand to see other girls who are more confident than them, who are more sexually fluid than them, who are more outspoken than them. We make up all these words, you know, you're aggressive, you're rude, you're bitchy, you're slutty, etc., to police women and to essentially silence them until their freedom of self-expression no longer exists. It's to diminish them and make them feel so small that they have no choice but to submit to fear and to adhere to these horrid standards that just don't fit everybody's preferences. You know what I mean? If you personally love feminine stuff as a girl, that means that you just lucked out, and what society expects you to look like is actually what you physically value. But for a lot of people, no matter how they identify, you know, the standards aren't always what they like. Even if this isn't a gender or sexuality or whatever issue, if this was just about artistic expression, not everybody wants to, for example, look like Kim Kardashian when they wear makeup. You know what I mean? Not everybody wants to wear contour on their cheeks. Some people want to wear red blush all the way up to their temples. But that's not socially acceptable because that doesn't fit into these nice categories of what a good so-and-so looks or a good that and that looks. You see? You see how this is problematic for everyone everywhere? My experience with going bald was as a way of breaking away the normality of how I looked, right? It was a way for me to get a little edgier, to go beyond what I usually did, to go outside of my comfort zone. For a long time, I associated myself with having long hair, and I felt comfortable being in that box, and I just thought, you know what, let's do something else. And that has pushed me so far, because it was sort of like this threshold for me. For me, it was like, you know what, I have a buzz cut. I can literally wear whatever I want. I do not have to apologize when I want to speak up anymore, because I already stand out. People already see that I don't fit a certain binary or a certain box that they want me to fit into. I am already not cis-het presenting just by shaving off my hair. There were people who were starting to refer to me by they, them pronouns, and those aren't necessarily my pronouns, and I am very thankful that they've started to do that, and I hope that you do that with everyone, not just people who present as non-binary or non-conforming. But it raised a lot of questions for how people reacted to me. There were people who, new people, strangers who had never seen me outside of me being bald. And I suddenly noticed that I didn't have similar privileges anymore. Suddenly I was assumed to be aggressive when I would open my mouth in class, for instance, or men would stare me down in the street in a menacing way instead of like in a sexualizing way. Suddenly I was entering spaces that I never had before just by cutting my hair off, which to me is so trivial, but as my embodied experiences show, it's rooted in so much history. We do so much with these social standards that dictate how we dress ourselves, how we groom ourselves, how we criticize other people, and how we criticize ourselves. Okay, so now I want to get into this little bulleted list section that I call What My Bald Experience Has Been. And this sort of plays on everything that I've just explained to you and discussed. So, number 1, I usually forget that I'm bald until someone looks at me weird. As I said, this is usually a dude. I've had once, I was on an escalator in Hong Kong, and I saw a couple who were hugging each other, and the guy was turned to me, and this was a straight couple, and he was staring at me, and at first, my first, like, general reaction was like, hey, why are you staring at me when you're on a date with your girlfriend? Like, that's weird, you know? And then I looked closer, and I realized that he was giving me a death glare. And I was like, oh, he's threatened by the fact that I don't adhere to heteronormative standards of what a woman should look like. Interesting. Next, I've had a lot of cishet men look at me and glitch like they can't comprehend my choice, which is so insignificant that I find it funny that they care so much. Oh yeah, this is a huge one. Men love to put women into this box of being innocent, you know, of essentially not having any agency, and I think cutting something off that is so symbolic in beauty standards, etc., like hair, men just could not compute, especially men who were older. My dad's friends, for example, my uncles or aunts even, they just could not understand. They'd be like, but why? Some people even assumed that I was sick. Some people can't comprehend the idea that a woman might not have long hair so far to the point that there has to be such a dramatic and horrible circumstance that forces a woman to actually want to cut their hair off, which is just beyond me. Next, my closest friends and family were so supportive and were immediately hyping me up. This was definitely a soul tribe kind of thing. This kind of weed out all the people who were close-minded in my life, and, you know, people's true colors really showed, because people who do not, especially women who do not have internalized misogyny, were like, that is so cool. Sometimes it was almost in a self-deprecating way, which I really did not like. I don't like when other women put themselves down in order to put other women up, you know? But I had a lot of people who I hadn't talked to in years who slid into my DMs and were like, that is so cool, I love what you're doing, and I love your energy, and this is so inspirational. And I was like, this is amazing. And it really made me think of, you know, my journey with finding people who are like-minded to me, because I used to feel like I was stuck in a bubble, in a vacuum. I was screaming into a void. I didn't have anyone who aligned with my interests, with my values, and I realized that was because I wasn't being vocal about them. That's literally it. Once you start speaking up for what you believe in, once you start dressing the way you want to dress, once you start getting closer to your higher self, your final form, your most evolved self, once you step into that person, other people who align with that energy, with those values, will just naturally be attracted to you. So how are people going to know that you are cool or that you mess with certain things until you say it, you know, or at least until you show it? And let me see. Okay, my mom was upset. Yeah, that's a big one. Which is so interesting because usually, like, my dad is a bit more traditional than my mom. She's kind of like, you do what you want type of person. And she was so upset, and I had never really seen her be that upset with something that I chose for myself. Like, I got my second piercing, my dad freaked out. My mom was kind of like, okay, you know, she was like, all right. I would wear like crazy things. My mom would laugh but she'd kind of just be like, well, you know, it's your body. And this was the first time that she was really not into it. And that makes sense with everything that I've been saying about gender norms and, you know, how women police each other, especially for a mother to a daughter. And I can understand, maybe it was her, part of her that's protective. You know, she knows how society will treat women who don't follow the rules. But it was really interesting for me to see my mom police me in a way that she had never done before. Next, people who met me in real life mistook me for my brother. This happened a lot, especially at first. You know, when you just like, when you first get your hair cut, you don't really realize that it's off. I had so many people who just didn't recognize me. People who I've met literally at least 5 to 10 times would be like, oh my God, I'm sorry, I thought you were Kanan the whole time. Or they'd be like, I did not realize that you are Selena. Like, I would be with my family and we'd meet a family friend and they'd be like, oh my God, that's your daughter the whole time? Like, people just completely did not recognize me, which to me was cool because, you know, I wanted to do this as a fashion statement of pushing the boundaries of how I express myself. So at least I succeeded in that. Next, a lot of people seem intimidated. This was another huge thing. I think women are not supposed to break the rules and how they're supposed to look. They're not supposed to break the rules and how they're supposed to talk, etc., etc. And I was already an outspoken person, but it was palatable for society because I was still feminine. But because I shaved my hair off, I presented much more masculine. And so suddenly I was disruptive. Suddenly I was aggressive. Suddenly I was a loudmouth, etc., etc. When in reality, like, yeah, I had gone through a transformation, but that's because I was doing shadow work. Like, my confidence levels would have been just the same if I hadn't done my shadow work. So I was at a different level because I was doing spiritual work. But a lot of people assumed that you have suddenly all this power just by rebelling in a certain way, which I would say, I think it encourages you to pursue that kind of power and embody that power because, you know, you're already in that space. But I don't think it necessarily comes with it. Okay, now the last two are pretty interesting because these were responses that I got from men in my life. The first one is that men went out of their way to tell me the growth process was going to take long and be tedious. I had a few guys who slid into my DMs and proceeded to mansplain to me what the process of shaving your hair off will be like. Suddenly, I was a simple woman with no brain cells and I could not understand the concept of hair growth. They were literally like, you know, that's going to take a really long time to grow in, right? You know, you're going to have a period of time where it looks weird, right? You know, you're going to look like this and this and this for a while and you have to deal with that, right? I was like, what? When did I ever ask? And if you're going to give me tips, I would highly appreciate that. You know, something like, oh, this is what you would do with your hair if you're feeling like it's in a weird in-between stage. You can use a hat. You can use this. Oh, this is a great conditioner. Oh, this is really healthy for your scalp. Maybe use this kind of oil just to rejuvenate your hairs. Stuff like that. I would love tips. Give me your tips, you know. Give me all your tips. But the mansplaining of what hair growth was going to be like, I'm like, girl, I've had a bad haircut before. Are you assuming that I'm going to regret my decision? Are you assuming that I don't understand how hair works? Are you assuming that this is a male experience because I'm getting my hair cut off really short? Yep. Silence for thought. That's what it was. The second one is that men went out of their way to slide into my DMs and validate the way I look. Oh man. Oh man. Oh men. The amount of men that were like, don't worry, you still look great. Or they're like fake surprised. They're like, oh my god, you know what? Actually, that kind of looks cool. Or they tried to find some sort of camaraderie with you because now you're like cooler, or you're one of the guys, or you're a cool girl, not like other girls just because you cut your hair off. And it was so weird because I got DMs from dudes that I had like literally hadn't talked to for years. Like strangers who are men who would come into my DMs, who, either found my Instagram or found me through YouTube, who I'd never interacted with before. They'd never DM'd me, only to slide into my DMs just to tell me, go out of their way to tell me that I look cool, because they assume that I need that validation from them. And you know what? I can't blame them. The society that we live in is built in a way that assumes that women would need that kind of validation from men. And that sucks. That mentality sucks. So if you're a dude and you have that thought where like a girl's doing something really cool and you think that, oh my God, I need to tell her because she will never know unless I do, we don't need that. Keep it to yourself. Trust me. Thank you. Thanks. I had a lot of dudes who are constantly in dialogue with me about like what they find cool with what I do with fashion, or what I find cool with what they're doing with their fashion. And they came up to me telling me their opinion, how they found it cool that I shaved my hair off or whatever. That's great, because that's like an actual friendship that we've built together based on how we look. But there were just like random people coming in who I'd never talked to. It's the same with like my body hair. I would post a picture with, I don't know, for example, like my armpit hair. And then some random dude will comment on that picture and be like, I like your armpit hair, or like nice armpit hair. Like I do not need your validation. I'm secure in the decisions that I'm making for my body. Thank you very much. Thank you. Respectfully, no thank you. I think that's all I have for you. And if you have any more questions, or if you'd like to go into more discussion with what I've, talked about today, I would love to do that. Please do so in the comments below. I'm going to remind you one more time to subscribe if you haven't, especially if you're new here. Join the family. I've got all of these other like resources. I've got websites, and I've got other videos where I talk about critical topics. And that's pretty much it from me. I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful day wherever you are and whatever time it is where you are. And I will hopefully talk to you in the next one. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you. Oh my God, I'm just going in a circle. I'll see you in the next one. I already said that. Okay, bye.